Hey Kings, and welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel. And today we are playing the Dreams of a White Russian Victory mod, which is, in its essence, a mod that changes the Soviet Union into essentially just Russia, focusing on the alternate history of if the White Russian movement, the White Russians, the anti-Bolshevik forces that fought the Reds during the Russian Civil War. What if they won instead of the Communists? What if the Communist Revolution never happened? And it did happen, but they lost. That's essentially the entire premise. And today we are going to be going down the Tsarist paths. Yes, there are two Tsarist paths, technically three, but I don't count one of them as being a Tsarist path because you are inherently more of a democracy, and it's more of a build your own path, build your own leader type of situation. So, it's cool and based and everything like that. I do consider only the Romanovs and the Rognal, something like that, paths to be, technically Tsarist. And so we are going to be doing some Tsarist playthrough this time because, the Marcus playthroughs tend to be relatively... they tend to be wacky in some cases, and they tend to be quite powerful in other cases when you look at just the general trend when it comes to either mods or just vanilla Hearts of Iron 4. And sometimes they're kind of, trash, like, Monarchist Greece. But hopefully this time they'll actually be relatively decent. We're not going to be doing anything, like, strictly ahistorical. The mod in itself is ahistorical, but, we're going to be trying to protect our little sphere of influence, and we're going to be trying maybe guard or sort of integrate Eastern Europe. You know how it is. You're playing the one big issue you have with all of the, alternate Russian paths is that even if you change a regime, even if you drastically change an ideology, you're never going to change the geopolitical situation. You always inherited the geopolitical situation of the regime that was before you. And so, even if you are playing technically, as the White Russian movement or a military junta or a Tsar or anything else, you always find yourself in essentially the same situation. The one thing that I really like about this mod, from the few times that I tested it out just to see if it's working, is that you technically don't own either Ukraine, Belarus, or any part of Finland. While they are in an alliance with you, sort of a remnant of the anti-red forces that were present within the Civil War, obviously. They are allied with you, and they do have their own focus trees, which is interesting because they are some of the most detailed focus trees for Ukraine or Finland. Belarus doesn't get a focus tree, unfortunately, but the Finnish focus tree and the Ukrainian focus trees, those are some of the most detailed and well done focus trees for, just the Ukraine and Finland in general. Even though it's technically a mod that focuses on Russia, and that's kind of an interesting one. It's definitely much larger than you would expect initially, because from what I expected initially was just sort of a maybe sort of a remake of the Road to 56, alternate path that is presented. But there are actually there's actually a communist path, there's a democratic path, there's a fascist path, there's the Tsarist path, there's a new, unique, completely sort of never seen before path that lets you build your own sort of legacy, your own, even your own leader, sort of basically giving them traits based on the actions that you do, based on the focuses you do. And that's a lot of fun, but all of that taking into consideration, all of those individual aspects of this mod, they're absolutely amazing, and I really like them. Today we're simply going to be doing a Tsarist playthrough. Here we go, the Congress of Tsaritsyn, and if you don't know, Tsaritsyn is essentially just the old name for, later Stalingrad and today Volgograd. And so there we go, we chose the Empire path because, the days of the Empire were actually a lot better. A lot better than the alternate situation which we are presented with right now, sort of a military junta. But I do believe that this is quite a long lag. But yeah, there we go. The Kingdom of Finland. So there we go. Even the Finnish are doing their own, even their own stuff, which is quite interesting, quite nice. I like the lore. But with all the speculation of what would actually happen, if the Bolsheviks lost, a lot of people immediately go to, well, the democracy would have survived. Well, the Tsar would have been brought back. I actually do believe that something like this, more of a military junta type of situation, or some sort of like a Francisco Franco type of situation, where essentially you find yourself in a dictatorship. I think that's the more likely result for Russia if the White Movement were to actually win. It's sort of an interesting point as to who would be the one to actually lead this junta. A lot of people like to bring up Kolchak because he was sort of the main figurehead, sort of the head of the White Movement there. But there were so many warlords initially that it, honestly, if you sort of take into account the new Tsar, and let's initially just go with the Ragnall, because, well, let's just keep the guy that we have right now. It's a new dynasty, so technically it's a continuation of the dictatorship. But it's sort of strange. It's sort of like if Francisco Franco crowned himself king. Do we have a new? No, we don't have a new portrait. It's sort of a shame. But yeah, the Russian Empire's back. So here we go. A new dynasty. So I think they actually want you to, as opposed to the Romanovs, I think they sort of want you to ally yourself, or maybe not strictly ally yourself with the Germans. They want you to at least another big lag. What's going on? Maybe the addition of the complex focus trees of oh no, it's just okay. So it's just the Spanish Civil War. A new Russian Tsar. Took you long enough to notice that, but. Yeah, it just seems like they want you to maybe kind of, well, there we go, there's the pact. So they do actually, you get to keep the pact, that's very nice. You do get to boost your stability a whole bunch. And as opposed to, you can see the Ragnall is sort of an option also with the democratic tree, but that one, yeah, I think that they essentially just want you to continue the status quo of sort of White Movement with this guy. So, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting, but theoretically, if the White Russian movement were to win, I do think that sort of a military junta situation would have been military junta situation is the most realistic one as to whether the sort of figurehead or the sort of dictator that would find himself in this Russia would try and make himself the new Tsar. I think that's a bit far stretched. Because obviously the Romanovs, if someone were to bring up a Tsar in this type of situation, the first thing that anyone would think about would be the Romanovs, I think. And these bonuses they're not great, but they're not terrible. It's sort of, well, let's just boost our stability and everything, and let's figure things out as we go. Because, I don't know. I think I'll try and just, oppose Germany. I think in both of these situations that we're presented, and I'm also going to try the Romanovs after this path. I think we're just going to oppose Germany just to see how well this sort of Russia performs in this mod. And because the Russia or USSR or whatever you want to call the Eurasian state versus the German Reich is sort of the big test in Hearts of Iron 4, whether a mod makes either country a little bit just too strong, or whether the path is a little bit too strong or too weak, or just whatever. It's sort of the ultimate test, because that's obviously the Western Allies. I mean, sure, they can go against Germany, but it's more of a stalemate, whereas with the Russians and the Soviets, it's usually you just roll over the other guy if it's too strong or if it's too weak. It's usually sort of a more offensive oriented situation. So we'll see how we go. You'd think that without any sort of meaningful Soviet support, the Republicans in Spain would just roll over and die almost immediately, and the Francoist, the Nationalist, United Nationalist Front would win almost immediately, but it seems like even without the Soviet Union, the Spanish somehow find a way to just mess everything up. Alright, here we go, tighten our grip. Now, from what I understand, this focus essentially asks the allies you have, so Ukraine, Belarus, and Finland over here, it sort of asks them very politely but very firmly, to essentially become our puppets, if I do understand the situation correctly. Because it doesn't outright ask them to be, annexed, so to say. It's more of a, you get to, also Mongolia, obviously. But it's sort of, ask them to become our puppet, and we'll see how they respond. Obviously, in this sort of situation, I think that sort of an alliance of these 4 countries against Russia still wouldn't be enough to completely and properly defend themselves. I mean, you might think that with Finland on side, it still would be sort of a balanced approach. But let's remember, we didn't actually have any sort of military purge this time, so the sort of the Winter War memes don't actually apply at all, because a major factor in the absolute destruction or the humiliation of the Red Army was actually the purge by Stalin of the military staff. So since we don't have that, and since the White Russian generals this time, we actually have really good generals. We have really good generals, have really good advisors. They almost all of them start right off the bat with infantry experts, the infantry expert trait. So actually, they're really good. And let's just put our men around here. Just if they get a little bit too cheeky, it would allow us to completely dismantle them rather fast. I do believe Belarus and Mongolia are obviously the weakest links. Ukraine is going to be, if anyone's going to be defiant, it's probably Ukraine and Finland. I don't suspect that Mongolia's. Wait, what? So we have, Belarus has rejected, Ukraine bows, Mongol bows, Finland rejects. So Belarus actually rejects. Finland I understand, but Belarus? The ones that I expected to reject would have been Finland and Ukraine, That's sort of the default sort of anti-Russian sentiment, during this period of time. But in the case of the Finnish, it was mostly anti-red sentiment. In the case of the Ukrainian, it's sort of this long-standing, oh shucks, situation that they find themselves in. But yet the Ukrainians, maybe they're really monarchistic. Maybe they just like the Tsar. Maybe they're really nostalgic. And in this world, they're led by Cossacks. So maybe, I don't know. Belarus doesn't really have a focus tree, so we don't really know. And Finland, I mean, that's kind of a given. Finland, Mongolia bowing. I mean, Mongolia being part of this alliance sort of doesn't necessarily make sense to me. Like, why? I mean, it does make sense that they would be allied to Russia. It doesn't make sense that they would try and be defiant on the account of Finland and Ukraine and Belarus. It just doesn't make sense. But let's quickly just dismantle all of these guys, both Belarus and the Finnish, because they didn't want to be puppets. And obviously we can just puppet them, and the focus is about puppeting them. But we're gonna annex them. It's a shame that we don't get any cores. We don't actually get any cores on those guys. Which I suppose does make it a little bit more beneficial to puppet them. But at the same time, we do sort of want a better front line against the Germans if they ever decide to go up against us. And having a Ukraine as a puppet is actually really good, because obviously they're the most industrially powerful of all of the sort of little allies of the initial, Moscow alliance, or whatever you want to call it. The Pact of Petrograd, yeah. They are the biggest industrial power, while Finland is sort of a second. Then you have the Belarus, and then Ukraine, and then the Mongols, the Mongolians. So it's So having Ukraine is probably the best case scenario. I think we lucked out this time because, I mean, realistically speaking, Finland refusing, Belarus refusing, that's sort of strange. So I think Belarus should have been the one to accept. I would just script it, to be honest. I would just script it. I mean, sure, there's a random chance or whatever. But I would always make Finland and the Ukraine refuse and Belarus just accept. It just makes sense to me that way. But Belarus immediately crushed. I mean, this is the reason. Belarus is the second weakest out of all of them. The most powerful is the Ukraine, and the second most powerful is Finland, Mongolia being the weakest one out of all of them. Just because they don't have enough manpower, they don't have enough industry, they have basically nothing. And so they have good generals, at least in vanilla. They do have some good generals, I do think, of cavalry and stuff like that. So it Let's make a yeah. I guess we can ask Poland. Now that's whatever. Let's just improve relations to make Poland accept. I mean, isn't it a little bit strange that Poland does have those borders? Does it have right now? I mean, would the 1920 war between Russia and Poland even happen? I mean, in this world, it would be like the war between Belarus and Poland, right? Maybe supported by Russia, but at the same time, the Russians were still fighting. That's interesting. That's interesting, and I think I would make Belarus a bit larger and make Poland a little bit smaller. If that's the case, because the independence and sort of the growth of Belarus would have been supported by everyone. And if the white movement was again supported by the Western powers, you'd think that Poland would be smaller. They wouldn't really have sort of a justified claim. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows how this sort of Russian dominance? That's interesting. But that's an interesting modifier. So they're our puppet, but not only they're a puppet, but we're actually just dominating everything they do and reducing their liberty. They're still not capitulated. Do I really have to? Do I really have to capture every single one of their victory points? No, that's a bit of a pain, but I suppose Poland. Oh, okay, Poland joined. So we do have Poland on our side this time, and that means that the fight against Germans is coming up here pretty quickly, I do believe. And here we go. Poland refuses the German ultimatum. Now, the one thing to remember is that, well, yes, they're a member of our alliance, but that technically makes it impossible for the Western powers to guarantee them. So, if the Germans attack Poland right now, which they're probably going to do within, yeah, there we go. So we have to join the war. Okay, there we go. But it means that, yeah, they're not guaranteed by the West or nothing like that. So this is technically just us, or, Russia plus Poland. We're not going to call in Ukraine, okay? Just Russia plus Poland fighting off against the entirety of the Axis, essentially. So the German Reich, Italy is going to join in pretty soon. The Hungarians are going to join in pretty soon, plus the Slovak puppet. So this is really a big test. This is truly a big test of whether if we can actually beat the Germans here without any sort of major support from the Western allies with. And even if they were to support us, they wouldn't do a damn thing, because the Western allies are in a terrible position at the beginning. Even in 1939, like France, the best thing you can do as France in 1939, going down sort of the more conventional way of playing, is that you just defend, attempt to survive, but we are actually managing to do some major damage here. Some encirclements, we are gonna absolutely destroy them, and let's see if the Hungarians are actually going to... no, they're still 2 focuses away. Okay, that's very good, so it does give us some time to inflict some major damage, some terrible damage on the Germans over there. So, you also have a lot of research slots, by the way. A lot of research slots. So, if there's one thing that the Ragnall focus tree path thing, Tsarist focus tree does for you, is it does give you quite a large amount of research and a lot of focus trees. And the industry side, not so much. The industry side is kind of and it doesn't really give you any like really big stability or war support or like army organization or whatever bonuses, but your generals are genuinely kind of good, but they're not that good. So this is the one issue, like the one big difference. If you plan to play this mod over, let's say the Russia reworked mod, is that the Russia reworked mod works. Well, it does give you some sort of ultimate goal. This mod doesn't necessarily give the individual paths any sort of like meaningful goal that you would be working towards. For example, in the Russia Reworked mod, links in the description, by the way, for all them videos. But in the Russia Reworked mod, I like it so much because it gives you a meaningful payoff. That's the one thing that's kind of lacking in a lot of focus trees, even in vanilla Hoi 4. But in this case, if like the Ragnall Tsarist path, opposing the Germans, you would think that you would gain access to Eastern Poland. You would gain access to Eastern Poland as a core, as a reward. Sort of in a similar manner to how if you go the with the Kaiser path or Germany, essentially you get your old borders, like Danzig, essentially Danzig, Dansk, whatever, the old German Empire borders for guarantees against the Soviet Union. I think one sort of even a small payoff or sort of a medium-sized payoff would be to gain Eastern Poland for guarantees against the Germans. I mean, that's sort of the sort of a brain dead just reverse Uno card if you want to make a Tsarist Russian path, is that you have a clear example of some sort of international international thing that you could do. Or for example, the Baltic countries, they could become your puppets. Or something like that, which just something, some way to interact with even like Turkey and the Middle East and something like that, building sort of towards a larger block. And I think that's one thing that's maybe missing a little bit from the individual paths within this mod, is that, for example, in the Russia Reworked mod, if you went with the junta, the military junta, you were able to create like the Slavic Empire with cores all around Europe. Absolutely brilliant. And there we go, the Italians joined, and yeah, let's have a non-aggression pact with Turkey. As you can see, I'm only just now doing all the like industry folk. Oh my goodness! Now that was a bad battle. That was a bad naval battle. Okay, let's not focus on the navy too much. Okay, that didn't happen. But yeah. So with the Russia Reworked mod, for example, you got to build this major power block of all the Slavic countries. And with the Tsarist mod, you got essentially to make a rebellion rise up in the German Reich, and you got to basically unite all the monarchists all around Europe. You got to create this sort of monarchist global hegemony. It was so cool. But in this path, everything, mild positive effects when it comes to the bonuses, when it comes to the focuses, but not like large ones. Like, for example, the Ukraine here is still my puppet, and it would be cool if you could integrate them a little bit faster, maybe outright annex them a little bit quicker or something like that, immediately give you cores on Belarus and everything, but yeah, we're definitely going to win this war against the Germans. It's going to take a little while because it's 1v1 again, or it's me and Poland versus like Germany, Italy, all them boys, Hungary's going to join in quite soon. Romania is in the Axis, though I'm not entirely sure if they're going to join in. That would be an interesting thing to see. Romania is going to join in pretty soon, and well, we'll have to see what happens, but I think we're definitely going to win, but just because we managed to defend Poland. Once we actually manage to defend Poland and clean up Eastern Prussia, you're just Prussia. You're basically just golden. And sure, we get pushed back every once in a while, but the thing that they lack the most is manpower. And if you manage to blunt the German spearhead right at the very beginning, they're essentially just not going to be very, very effective. That's just a rule of thumb in Hearts of Iron 4 in general. Alright, so we're about to completely annihilate the Axis here. Germany's long gone, and we are now pushing into Italy through the Alps, which is always a bit of a pain, but hey, we're managing. It's alright. But one thing, okay, so we're clearing up basically the final opponent of Ragnall's Tsarist path, or White Russia. And what do I think about it? It's not terrible. It's not terrible, but it feels a little bit just meh. There's no big turning point. There's no big idea that would make the Ragnall path some like unique path. It sort of feels not exactly lackluster, but it feels maybe a little bit uninspired. It's essentially just a continuation of the status quo, which I accept. But I would have maybe instead preferred just a path that says the continuation of the military junta or something like that, where you get to do something with Ragnall. Because right now, as you create a new dynasty, and what do you do with it? Well, nothing. You don't really do anything. You continue the status quo. You don't even get to core Belarus or Finland or anything like that. So it's maybe a little bit disappointing. So let's go to the Romanovs and see what they're all about. Alright, here we go. Let's pick the Romanovs now. And from my understanding of the lore and everything, and this choice that you have here, is that the Romanovs are technically like the unpopular, the sort of disgraced lineage, the disgraced Tsarist line, and there we go. We have Vladimir Romanov, Vladimir Romanov, right there, and not a bad beginning. Even though that picture of him on the focus tree path right there, is actually a picture from him being a little bit older. I think it's from like the 40s to 50s, something like that, whereas the actual picture we have for him as a country leader is much younger. And so, there we go. It's going to be interesting because we're technically playing sort of a more disgraced monarch line. They obviously had a bit of an unfortunate situation at their hands when it comes to the whole Great War and the aftermath and everything. You could say that technically, it was the bad leadership of the Romanov dynasty that led us to the situation we find ourselves in right now. But I would say to that, that's a bit heretical. So let's not do that. So as the Romanovs, heretical, as the that's blaspheming our great royal line, because they brought back the old standard, which I actually kind of like that the Bragnell dynasty had sort of a unique flag. But yeah, so from my understanding, we're sort of going to be a little bit maybe more aggressive with an opportunity to, okay, so our alliance dissolved, and now we have the alliance of Kiev from all the other states. So immediately you can say that the alliance that the White Russians built up is immediately disappearing, and we're going to have to do something about that. Maybe the Romanovs want their empire back, and it seems that we are going to get it back. Alright, there we go. We're finishing the focus that essentially just declares war on all of the members. Like, no, we don't care, about your little alliance. We don't even want a war goal. We just want war, and we don't care. Because those are our core lands. We're going to core them, and we're going to lose stability. But we don't care. We're going to core them even before this war is over. That's how much we don't care about your existence, little Ukraine, Belarus, Mongolia, and Finland. You're Russia, and you're always going to be Russia. Essentially, that's the sort of aesthetic that I'm getting from this this Romanov line, I guess you could say, the focus tree path or whatever. And it's cool. It's cool. Essentially, we are doing a very similar thing to the Randall path, but instead of like asking them like become our puppet, and if you decline, okay, we're gonna war goal and we're gonna declare war and then puppet you. That's sort of what you're supposed to do. But then instead, we're like screw you, those are our core states, okay, and we're gonna declare war upon you, and we're not even gonna ask for your subjugation. We're not even going to ask. We're just going to full war you, death war. It's like, it's not a death war because the Russians obviously gonna win this one if you have like at least 100 divisions, which you start off with more than 100. So even if like you have the most lackluster military build-up, as long as you don't delete those 100+ divisions, you're just gonna win. And that's actually kind of cool. That's kind of cool that you can you have a sort of a different feel from the path that you're playing right now, even though it's technically a very similar situation, right? Very similar situation. Doesn't exactly matter all that much whether you core the land or whether you make puppets out of those countries. Then it comes to like, well, it does, it has its ups and downs, both of those situations, but you technically own those puppets, right? So it's technically your land, just under management of maybe the previous owner, technically, just so you could maybe use their troops. Whereas if it's your actual core, you can do whatever with it. You're not sort of restricted to just receiving token and industry and token troops. You actually get full access to industry and the manpower and everything like that. That's the basic difference, obviously. And the very different feel, and I like that. It's a very different feel, and I do have to say that being a little bit more aggressive, will that suit the Romanovs? I think it would. I think it would because they're sort of back with a vengeance, and I like that they sort of went with that thinking. Whereas the old White Russian line was sort of the military junta line. If you keep them, technically you keep them in power, right? When you do the Ragnall dynasty, sort of the status quo, but maybe a little bit more assertive because hey, we're no longer sort of the back foot on the back foot, sort of the backwater of Europe. We're doing okay right now, and we'd like to you to be a little bit more submissive. Instead, the Romanovs are kicking the door in and being like, "This is our empire, okay? Give it back. Those are our lands. Give them back." And so, yeah, we'll just have to see how the Romanov path progresses. But from what I'm seeing, definitely a little bit more fun. Alright, the Romanov wild ride continues as we essentially just got in a non-aggression pact with the Germans through our focus, not the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And yeah, we're gonna just attack Poland. We're just gonna annex Poland, and it's going to be Russia again. And that's interesting. It's interesting that it's not like full-on aggression because. Well, like the full-on aggression paths with any sort of Russia rework, it's usually directed at basically everyone around you. Just have to sort of pick a sphere where you want to become more assertive, like the Middle East, and here we go, Poland's gonna die. But like the Middle East or the Balkans or Eastern Europe or maybe Scandinavia or Asia, something like that. And usually it involves just plain old attacking China, taking over all of China, taking all of their manpower, and then using it to dominate Japan, and then using all of that to dominate Europe, and then kicking America down as the final nail in the coffin. But this is sort of more moderate aggression, because with Russia, when you make a focus tree for Russia, it's not the same as making a focus tree for example, Romania or Bulgaria. Because with Romania, like the Balkan hegemony, let's say, focus tree, is like you're taking on countries that are only slightly weaker than you. Like, for example, the Romania against Hungary path, right? The subjugate Hungary, the Hungarians, essentially, the path that does that. It's not like Hungary's that much more powerful than you or that much more weaker than you. It's sort of a 55-45 type of situation. But with Russia, when creating a Russian Litvinov-Ribbentrop, I like this. They actually, yeah, that's a custom one. Okay, we're gonna take over the entirety of Poland, right? So maybe we still have that non-aggression pact, so no deal with the Germans, no deals with the Germans, because the signed the treaty thing doesn't actually do anything for us, so no deals with the Germans. There we go. It's very beneficial for the USSR or even Russia, whatever, if you actually don't plan on just doing anything with your army against Poland or anything like that. But since we're going to take over the entirety of Poland, they might as well take over the entirety of Poland and ignore the Germans. Danzig is now, it's going to be Russian from that one, but yeah, the big issue with making a Russian focus tree is that, look, there's barely anyone that's going to be able to stand up to them, and so you have to make them really weak first of all, which isn't actually that difficult, taking into consideration the historical context. And you have to make them a little bit limited when it comes to their army actions. Like, I think border conflicts would have been really great. There we go, Poland is dead. Border conflicts would have been really great as sort of a tool for a sort of a more revanchist Russia. Because, I mean, like, for example, now we're going to finish the focus, conquer the Baltics. And do you really think that the Baltics are going to stand up to us? No, they're not. I mean, if they're player-controlled, okay, maybe they can do a little bit of damage, but still, they are going to get steamrolled, just as Poland did, just as the Alliance of Kiev did, just as anyone who stood against the Romanovs and their glorious empire did, except for that one little time, a couple of years ago with the cousin. That doesn't matter right now, okay? What matters right now is that Vlad is angry and Vlad is hungry, and we're gonna take back what's ours. And here we go. It's time to, it's time to reap a little bit of vengeance upon the Germans. Immediately they start attacking. That's absolutely wonderful. But yeah, let's support the Allies a little bit. Obviously, the French got steamrolled, and the British are sort of fighting the battle for Britain and everything like that. But the Hungarians joined in. The Germans took over Norway. This usual stuff. Everything's going sort of more historically this time. And so that's fine. But we own Poland, and because we initiated the non-aggression pact, the Germans actually didn't do anything. And we had to do away with the non-aggression pact, which is kind of funny, because you'd think that the moment that the Germans essentially got kind of betrayed, because essentially we initiated the non-aggression pact under the premise that, look, we have our territorial ambitions of reinstating old Imperial Russian lands. You have your territorial ambitions of reinstating the Greater German whatever. And so, let's work together, non-aggression pact, everything like that. And then immediately upon signing it, we stole the old German lands. It's absolutely wonderful. And you'd think that someone like Mr. H, former artist, the Austrian artist guy with sort of a funny stash, a little bit of a temper problem here and there, you'd think that he would immediately go, well, that's not gonna stand, is it? Immediately break the non-aggression pact and just attack us. I'm wondering about Romania, because they're sort of teetering on the edge of joining the Axis, but I'm not entirely sure. The historical Romanian focus tree path is so bad that I never actually played with it, and I really don't know how actually the whole thing goes, because you actually, to play historically Romania, right? Outside of multiplayer, obviously, it's so disadvantageous for you, because you lose half your country. You lose half your country, which is, it's not all that great, is it? So, can't really think of a really similar situation. I mean, Vichy France, obviously, but Vichy France sort of requires you to lose. So, Poland, I don't know how the new DLC is gonna handle Poland all that well, but I haven't really been keeping up with all the updates and everything, so. But I know that Poland has the ability to just give up Danzig. But at the same time, you can just conquer Lithuania very early on, form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, gain all the cores, give up Danzig because it doesn't really matter that much, and then just go against the Russians or the Soviets. Fairly easy. You can also, playing as the Polish, just give up Eastern Poland to the Soviets. But yeah, it's sort of a rump state at that point, sort of a pointless rump state that's gonna get declared on by either Germany or the Russians anyway, so it's not exactly all that great, is it? But let's initiate the Great Offensive. I think we've been sitting here contemplating the existence of the Germans for a little longer than is necessary, and so let's just kind of smash them. Okay, so we're about to completely smash the Germans, and the Romanians are about to join the Axis, I think. Yep, there we go, join the Axis. Sort of a bad time to do that, friend, but whatever. You do you. And the one thing I'd like to say is that I really like this Romanov path. I really like the Romanov path. Compared to the first path that we showcased. Obviously, I haven't gone through all of them. I don't know all the intricacies, the details, the everything like that of the Democratic path, the Bolshevik path. It seems a bit strange. Why would you put that on? Whatever. But there we go. The German Reich has capitulated. For some reason, we also own Belgium and whatever. But I do like it because it has sort of a flavor to it. It has sort of a feel to it. He's a disgraced, the Romanovs are this disgraced dynasty of a lot of shame that lost all of Russia almost lost all of Russia in this timeline to the Bolsheviks, to the Reds, to the Democrats. Ew, cringe, right? And so they're back, and they're back with a vengeance. And they're gonna kick in the door of the entirety of Eastern Europe, and they're gonna kick down the door of Central Europe and just swarm in there, retake the empire, core all of it, and ultimately later on destroy the West. Right? That's the feel I'm getting from the Romanovs. So with the Romanov dynasty, it's sort of more of a, let's play it a little bit safe. Let's play it a little bit safe, continuing the status quo, really not doing all that much. We're gonna assert a little bit more of a dominant control over Finland, Mongolia, Ukraine, Belarus, and we're also going to invite Poland to our faction. We're gonna invite Bulgaria to our faction. It's sort of like, Isn't that a little bit weak? Like, you do gain industrial bonuses from it, a tiny bit. You do gain some stability from it. You do gain, like, research and everything like that. But is that fun? Is that fun? Is it fun to, like, have, the industrial focuses can be fun, but industry in itself is only useful as far as your armies are able to wield the weapons that are built by that industry. In Hearts of Iron 4, right? And so, the Romanov path is just a little bit more fun, because you get to... and they didn't join the Axis, actually. That's kind of hilarious, isn't it? Let's check the focus. Like, what do they... okay, so the Germans, because we capitulated the Germans, the Romanians can't join the Axis. Well, we actually managed to save them, because they would have just gotten steamrolled. So, you would have been Russian if you managed to join the Axis. But let's look at the casualties, and yeah, let's just finish itself. So, definitely. The Romanov path was by far the better path here, and I enjoyed it quite a bit more than the first path we showed. Not that the first path was bad; it was just wasn't that great. Wasn't that great when it comes to the roleplay aspect. It didn't have enough flavor to it. It was more of a, we've been doing this for 30 years. We've been doing this for 20 years. Let's just keep on doing what we've been doing, and. I suppose that that's not a terrible argument to make, but it's definitely not as fun as just retaking the empire, covering it even before we've taken it, everything like that, sort of just this dominance. And Venezuela actually joined the Axis. Well, we now have a colony in the Americas. Well, thanks, Kings, for watching. Links in the description. See you next time.